Hi, my name is Mike Buck, and today I'm going to talk to you about a class that I teach called AP Seminar, and how this class, I think, connects to some broader public education trends that are currently being discussed. And so I want to actually start by rewinding all the way back to everyone's favorite time period, jokes aside, COVID, and just talk about how I came to start teaching AP Seminar. So back during COVID, I was doing some studies on really what kinds of AP courses our demographic of students was most likely to be successful taking, right? And so I was looking at performance on these tests and on these exams, and one of them that caught my attention was AP Seminar and AP Research, which is a part of this broader AP Capstone program. And one of the things that I found really compelling about AP Capstone was that it wasn't just a traditional, like, you take an end of course exam and it's multiple choice free response, and if you do well, great, you got credit, and if you don't, then you're out of luck. The AP Capstone program is that students actually complete almost like really projects, right? What we call performance tasks. They write papers, they engage in collaborative research, and especially in AP Seminar. And that was really compelling to me. It was different. It was process oriented. And so I brought it to our school. Now, this is a second year teaching this class. And I want to tell you about one of the performance tasks students complete, where they get potentially they submit their paper to the College Board and potentially get college credit for. And that performance task, they identify a problem in society as a group, and then they work together collaboratively to research, write individual research papers, okay, on lit reviews. So they're pulling in academic research, and then they come back together and they have to do a presentation that presents a solution. And so in the beginning of the year, I do a mock performance task where they do this, but it's not the real deal, so I can give them really feedback on their research and on their presentations. And I focus it on improving public education, because it's something that I think every student can relate to. And this year, what I found was, as I asked students to get into groups and choose topics, that there was one topic that just dominated in all the other topics in terms of student interest, and that was career and technology, like this connection between what I'm doing now in school and how that will translate to career down the road. And the other thing was real life experiences. And so students engaged in this research, and then we did this big event called Grill Day. And Grill Day was like this idea where they would present their research and their solutions to top people in our organization, and then get grilled, quote unquote, on their research, and then we'd all come back together and we would eat grilled hot dogs and just have a celebration. And this experience taught me a couple things. Okay, taught me that when you, as a school, okay, give students something that they see actually matters, okay, I think they're much more compelled to fully engage. And that was something that I've been in education now for almost 20 years, and for me to see the level of engagement for students when it's really framed a task, gave them agency and enabled them to do the task on their own, and then ultimately have a point of presentation, was an incredibly powerful thing. So that was, I think, takeaway one, is that it really invested me in this idea that we have to give kids, we have to believe, I think, one, that our kids' futures, like our aspirations for their future, it's not just something like what they do. It's not just something that at the end of the day is preparing them for a future, that they can do things now, that they have ideas now, that they have the capacity and ability now to engage in stuff that we would ultimately ask them to do once they go to college and ultimately go to the workforce. I was just amazed at the level of thought and research that my students, were able to complete. So I think that's one. I want to go back though to the topics that they chose, because I think that it really speaks to something that, as I've done more research into students at a national level, that is on kids' minds. Okay, and I think that what that is that a lot of students don't see the value of the current educational system and what it's providing. Okay, when you look nationally at different studies, I think there was a Gallup study conducted. This is a ways, this is back in 2015, but this Gallup study basically found that a third of 11th graders actually felt engaged in school. Only a third. Okay. And I think that when I've looked at other studies, that kind of really repeats it. Kids are bored more broadly in school. And so I think that's one big trend. I think the other thing I've seen, I've looked at some interesting data on self-efficacy, and it's surprised, like, in other words, whether students feel like in a school environment they ultimately can be effective, and that data is really low as well. So I think that there's this trend of boredom, and ultimately I think that there's this trend of students just not seeing relevance. Okay, and so I think that there's some really big just things that are kind of coming out nationally on a conversational level. And I want to talk about those two things today. And the first one I want to talk about is the College Board's work on really promoting project-based learning. Okay. So just to kind of frame this for you, so I went to the College Board Forum a couple weeks back, and honestly, like, when you think about the College Board, you're kind of in an interesting place, right? Because at the end of the day, they want students to take their exams. Like, that's the way that they generate revenue for the College Board. But they also have to demonstrate that the stuff that the exams are actually getting kids to be prepared for college. Like, it's indicative of their potential future success in college. That's what colleges want to see. And they're in a tricky position for a variety of reasons, one of which is that many colleges have gone test optional for the SAT. So I think that's caused them to, as New York Times recently reported, take a major hit in their total revenue. But they're also really trying to expand their AP program. And their argument is, based on their internal studies, that that in taking AP classes, that kids are more likely to be prepared for college. Okay. And one of their, I think, strategies for doing that is they're really looking at student interest as a driver for the course offerings. So, for example, soon they're going to offer AP Business Principles. I think they're piloting that next year. But in essence, think about like a Shark Tank style. This is my understanding of it. Think of a Shark Tank style business pitch where students engage in a study to develop a business plan and proposal, and then part of their AP score is ultimately presenting that. And that's really to say, hey, kids have interest in going to business. We want to be a part of building that skill. And again, you see the kind of imprints of that being project-based, right? One of the things that they've said is with the project-based stuff like AP Seminar, AP Research, both of those are project-based, and really they're seeing a lot of gains among Black students, Hispanic students in terms of their performance in those areas. So that's really interesting. And of course, Computer Science Principles is a new class. It's very project-based. So they have these project-based classes that are that are like performance tasks are integrated into the student experience, and then they have performance tasks where the actual course is designed around performance tasks that ultimately prepare you for the actual AP exam, which is the same as, kind of the traditional AP exam, the multiple choice free response, right? So anyway, so one of the things that they have cited is the Lucas Educational Foundation, which is run by George, kind of not run, but like funded by George Lucas. George Lucas is a big project-based learning fan, apparently, and so he wanted to conduct a study where they were able to look at, if a student engages in project-based performance tasks, does it actually prepare students to perform well on end of course exams? And so they conducted an independent study where they developed curriculums for AP Environmental Science and AP Government. And through this independent study, they found that students who took a project-based approach did way, way, way better on the actual AP exams for AP Government and AP Environmental Science. Okay, and so and you can look up all those studies, so the College Board is looking at this and they're saying, hey, this is the route, ultimately, for many of our courses we're gonna take, okay, because they see the learning. And I think when I've looked at some of these curriculums, I mean, it's incredibly powerful. I think one of the modules, so as part of the AP Environmental Science curriculum, one of the modules is they look at, basically they take on different countries, okay, and they have to evaluate sort of climate policy from the perspective of their respective country, and then they come together in collaboration with other countries to figure out and come up with an agreement on how to address climate change. So this is like going back to this idea of students want real experiences that are tied to things that actually matter. These projects are very much in that realm. Okay, they're actually doing things and solving problems in their current capacity as a high school student that actually matter. So I think that's a big trend. I think is this idea of project-based learning as a means of showing kids, hey, your ideas matter right now, and we're going to provide an avenue for you to do research and ultimately seek to solve these ideas through the skill sets that you currently have. And that's not, by the way, that's not a new idea, but I think it's definitely, with the College Board kind of taking this on, is going to be really big moving forward. The second thing I want to talk about is, I think right now, maybe everyone's hot topic, which is AI. And I just, one of the things I think, there are two things that have really struck me recently about AI. One comes from Mike Miles, the superintendent of HISD, who basically, I think on LinkedIn posted a message about the vision for HISD moving forward, and ultimately that this real embrace of AI, and planning on teaching AI in to teachers in the summer, and ultimately like being aggressive about ensuring that that students in HISD ultimately are building these skills, because I think that what is true at a global level is, I think not everyone's a strong word, but people are seeing that AI is going to be something that's fundamentally important in the future, and that people who understand AI and ultimately know how to use it are going to be way more set up for success than those who don't. And so that's one, was that piece by Mike Miles for one of the biggest school districts in the nation, coming out and saying, pivoting really, because like honestly, when you look at schools, I think in the past couple decades, and I think schools have been very standardized testing obsessed, coming out and saying, hey, we've got to be bold with this. And I know there are a lot of opinions about Mike Miles in terms of the HISD takeover. I get that, but I think it says something when you have someone who really is trying to ultimately turn around a school district, who's coming out and saying, hey, we got to pivot and make these connections for students clear, when we know that for students that there's going to be more choice with schools, and schools have to be able to come up with a compelling vision for students if they're going to ultimately A, keep them, and then B, keep them engaged. Like what they're doing in the school actually matters. Okay. The second thing that I wanted to share comes from Roberto Rodriguez, who's the Assistant Secretary of Planning, Evaluation, and Policy Development at the Department of Education. And and he was talking with some people in the context of ultimately, people saying, I think I'm going to sit this AI thing out. And what he said in that context was, basically, you're going to create greater inequities by trying to set out AI, because at the end of the day, it's going to come down to what schools are willing to quickly adapt to what AI has to offer, and in providing those experiences to students. I mean, I personally, and I'm going to hopefully post some videos about this because it's something through my course AP Seminar, the College Board has come out and said, they are going to through AP Seminar, they want students to experiment with AI, and they've created some. This is like I highly encourage anyone who's curious about this. I think the team that does AP Seminar has done a really good job of delineating between appropriate use for AI versus inappropriate use for AI. I think take an initial like stab at trying to like create some guidelines for students, right? But this is an open field, and I think the key for us as educators is we have to actually be in the game and experimenting and figuring this stuff out. Because if we're slow to act, I think it's going to really have implications for our kids down the road. And I think like kids want this. I think kids know that AI is going to be the future. And if we're creating policies that actually inhibit a student's ability to do the thing that they're going to ultimately have to do for their job down the road, I think that is something we want to really avoid. Right. So I think those are the two things when I think about vision for schools for the future. Okay. At the end of the day, okay, I think that as for schools publicly, nationally, we have to very, very strongly show that what you are doing in class right now matters for your future. And that is really challenging for a school or for a school district that's thinking about, how to, budget cuts and all those different, financial challenges and things like that. But I think that if you don't really align around a clear purpose that kids can relate to, that's beyond just this idea of we want to get kids into college, because I think that's important. But I think at the end of the day, I don't always think that that's super clear or compelling for kids, how it's going to translate to their future in the way maybe it did 10, 15 years ago. I think that things have changed now for kids. And so I think the way we have to do that is really think strategically about the substance of the classes. Are we asking kids to do truly meaningful work? And then I think the other thing is that we really have to go and explore AI pretty rapidly and strategically understand how we're going to build AI skills for the future. And so I think for any school grappling, right now I think is a critical point for all schools nationally for a variety of reasons. And I think that we have to be honestly grappling with these things, having conversations, not just with our peers, right? But across an organization, especially with kids. Let's engage kids and try to understand what they see for their future. And like the College Board is doing, right? They're offering business principles, they're offering AP anatomy and physiology because they saw a need where kids were like, we want to go into the nursing profession. This is a change from previous times, okay, where that's becoming a really, really popular field. I've checked in with some of my students, and that's something I found to be true. That's how we really compel and engage students, I think, in this new era. So thank you for listening. I know this is a little bit long. Get really excited about talking about this kind of stuff. And I hope you all have a great day.